Alright fellas, today is the day we are making a tier list for the DPS spec with the upcoming patch 11.1, more importantly the upcoming season 2. So we have with us of course the spreadsheet of the results when it comes to the DPS in single target. We also had, just to remind ourselves, the results of the raid testing in the PTR of how specs were doing, and we also have kept several dozens results of the top keys being done in Mythic Plus to see the results of those specs in Mythic Plus as well. Much like we have done before, we're also going to help ourselves just to paint the picture slightly better with the alignment chart, because putting two specs evenly in the A tier or in the B tier, maybe because one is S tier in Mythic Plus and absolutely terrible in the raid, the other is S tier in the raid and absolutely terrible in Mythic Plus, wouldn't paint the clear picture. Whereas then, if instead you move here and you see that we were talking about, let's just say, Frost and Unholy, now you know that we meant them equal in the B tier because Frost was much better in Mythic Plus but much worse in the raid, whereas Unholy was much better in the raid and much worse in Mythic Plus. So it would paint a better picture of how the specs are, doing right now. So let's start with the first one. We are operating under the copium angle that this nerf is the nerf that kills augmentation. You are out of the picture for now.
Wait until the point.
Yep.
Why are you guys nerfing Demonology Warlocks to the ground?
Because we'd rather you didn't play Demonology.
Ain't no love, ain't no love.
We are believing this is a we would rather you not play demonology situation of times past, where the spec is being shelved for Blizzard's rework for the next patch. Let's just go that way when it comes to augmentation. A bit more seriously, the spec has lost much more in Mythic Plus than they have lost in the raid. In the raid is possibly likely still somewhat average compared to the value they have lost in Mythic Plus. Now, besides them though, let's start with the trash. Let's start with the rubble at the bottom that nobody cares about. Now, part of this might be because of bugs, might be because of players not really being into the specs and not giving you basically a lot or enough to play, really. So it's even hard to be able to judge them properly. In this case, it would be these specs. Technically, it would have been Affliction as well if Affliction didn't just receive a pretty hefty set of buffs. But for now, these would be the specs that would be towards the lower end of results. Also, there is also an extra with these specs, because sometimes, you know how it goes, Arcane is here, or even Marksmanship is here, but sometimes it's not even because the specs themselves are this bad. Sometimes it's because there are other specs in their very same class which might be doing drastically better. So their value is, seen as lost a little bit more, because at the end of the day you have to choose the spec in your class, and very often players will just go towards who is doing best. Admittedly, BM has just been nerfed, so preemptively they used to be here. With this 8% damage nerf, we are just conservatively keeping them here. But when it comes to results, for example, let's put them back here for now. Even talking about the results themselves in both Mythic Plus and the raid, even just a few weeks ago in the PTR, as well as the popularity of the specs we have mentioned in Mythic Plus, Fire and BM were both doing quite well. So it's presumably their value in Mythic Plus will be very high, and their value in the raid. Right now they are the premier spec in their class to be played in the raid. So obviously their value will be very high in both Mythic Plus and raiding. So they stay over here right now. However, we have to go back all the way down again to talk about, again, more specs that have not been doing great, or you can't expect them to do that well, basically. And that is Fury Warrior, it's also Demonology, it is also Unholy, it is also Subrog. Why not? We also have Feral over here. Now, all of these specs have a mixture of problems. In the case of Fury, for example, you have the issue that arms right now now is simply out-damaging Fury, especially in Mythic class, especially in AoE. Yes, we have also looked at the current results, and Arms is also casually doing the best in terms of simulations for single target, but even in AoE, after the set of buffs they have been receiving, they have been doing quite well as well, so Fury obviously loses out as a result. Demo is somewhat the same in terms of damage, in terms of AoE, especially Destro, and even in single target. Yes, to be fair, in single target, calling these results single target wasn't really true, because we mentioned multiple times these bosses basically have no single target. They have multi-hitting situations where Destro can do very well, plus most of these results with Destro were bugged, and not many players were playing Demo to begin with anyways. But even without that, Destro has been doing better, and even now the buffed version of Affliction is doing better than Demonology anyways. Unholy is simply doing worse than Frost, so again they lose out on their possible value because Frost is out damaging them both in Mythic class and in the Raid, even going by ideal results in the Raid, simulated results in the Raid. Single target damage, Frost is still out damaging Unholy as well, and Subtlety is ahead mostly again because of their slightly higher popularity in Mythic Plus, which is still very small. We're not talking about Rogues are not having a good time right now in terms of both the results we have seen, but also the popularity we have seen in the PTR. Rogues are not doing that well at the moment. Another spec we can put here together with Feral is Survival. These two go hand in hand very often in terms of not being too good, even in the actual simulations where Feral is missing. Survival is middling, but it is still losing out to BM, and likely you will keep playing BM anyways as a hunter, so there isn't much to be excited about when it comes to Survival either. Who has been doing and continues to be doing slightly better than these specs, as we mentioned, was Arms, which has been doing quite well despite Fire being overall the best. We could still put Frost Mage here. Putting it here would, fine. We can put it one tier below, but in terms of even just results, even the actual simulations, Fire and Frost are practically 1% apart of each other in terms of simulated damage. Of course, when it comes to actual PTR popularity in Mythic class, Fire was the de facto choice because of their burst windows compared to Frost Mage. So you should still have a generic advantage when playing Fire Mage over playing Frost. So even though technically raid-wise they might have the same damage-wise balance pulled out, the main difference could come out when it comes to Mythic Plus. If their raid value is the same, their Mythic Plus value would be, slightly below them in Mythic Plus, which is what eventually will pull more and more players to play Fire over playing Frost. And because more and more good players will go and play Fire, the average results of Frost will be weaker and weaker, because the better players will be playing Fire more and more. That's usually what happens when there is a divide between two specs, like we mentioned. If more and more players keep playing Frost DK, even though Frost is not particularly good right now, they will still gain more value because the better players want to play the spec that is doing the best damage, so they will move over to Frost DK, just like they will move over to Fire Mage. Another spec being completely middling right now is Ret, and for once we actually put the surprise of Dev with the understanding that augmentation is dead. Then Dev is actually doing much better now. Their damage wasn't too poor to begin with, even now in the Sims is completely on par with many other specs, together with Ret, who has remained a popular pick in the PTR when it came to Mythic Plus, so it's likely will continue, of course, in Season 2. When it came to the results in the Raid, it was completely middling again, but because of the popularity of the spec itself, it will still find decent enough room to find play. They are still bogged down by the fact that we might have more value of Protection Paladin in Mythic Plus, making it less likely for a Ret Paladin to be viable, but unlike previous seasons, now you also have a counter to Protection Paladin being Vengeance, making it at least more likely that you could have a Ret Paladin in your comp. Now, what could be the exact opposite is Havoc. So Havoc, in terms of results, is doing quite well simulated wise. In terms of popularity, in Mythic Plus, it was amongst the 5, 6, 7 of the more played specs, but towards the bottom of popularity. There is the problem of Mythic Plus and Vengeance existing, because if Vengeance exists and Vengeance does indeed become the meta spec, then Havoc won't see play, or it is much less likely to see a comp with double Demon Hunter in high key levels. So it would be harder for Havoc to gain more ground in Mythic Plus. So while their performance in the raid can still be quite high, quite good value, their value in Mythic Plus, which should still be quite powerful, will progressively lose out the more Vengeance is meta. The more Vengeance is meta, the more Havoc will have to just lose out on their power in Mythic Plus. That's the risk of playing Havoc right now. Now, we go for a surprise here. We put double Shamans in S tier. That's right. And we can even finish, with just putting Priest and Balance Druid here. Double Shaman in S tier is here because up to previous seasons, you were under the misconception that it was only enhancement to be OP. At the start of the season, it's Restore Shaman, so neither of them is being played, but pay attention, for starters, Elemental was already played more than enhancement, and then when Restore Shaman starts losing out, both of them are thinking, now it's our time to shine. Both of them start being played at the same time, very high play rate, and then clearly it is decided the way to go would have been enhancement. And then Elemental Shaman loses out. But as you can see, Elemental Shaman has remained quite popular below the meta ones, and then has risen over time in the past month or so. And in the PTR, it was doing very well. In DPS, in Mythic Plus testing, Elemental Shaman was very high in damage. Yes, technically, we don't have sims working yet for Elemental, but the presumed results are quite good right now. Plus their current power in Mythic Plus, and the fact that it's an enhancement to have been nerfed. That's the thing. It's unlikely that both of the specs will remain at S tier, because just like we said for Havoc and tanks, it's even more true for two different DPS. Imagine if both Fire and Frost Mage were S tier. It has never happened basically since BFA Season 2 that specs were so strong you would run both of them of the same class, for example, like Rogues. So it's not likely that you will be able to have both of these play in the same comp in Mythic Plus, meaning that one of these two will have to win out. However, unlike Season 1 of The War Within, where it was more clear-cut that enhancement would have made it out, now it's way more 50-50. The nerfs given to enhancement back to back have eventually kept them to be closer to Elemental Shaman now. Elemental Shaman is still very powerful, it still was and still is in live very powerful, but now with the nerfs of Enhancement Shaman in Season 2 and Elemental not really being nerfed, it is now more likely that they have a chance to be in the meta discussion, especially, we have to go back talking about them, especially if Vengeance is meta, because if Vengeance is meta, you bring in magical damage debuff, you bring in the possibility of running magical damage caster comps. So you will be bringing the Vengeance and then maybe the Shadow Priest to bring API to another caster, which could be Fire Mage, and then finish out with another caster. In this case, it could be Elemental Shaman. That is why the value of Elemental Shaman is much higher this season, or this upcoming season, compared to Season 1, and now have a good chance at competing with enhancement at being towards the top. That is the main reason why Elemental would be here. Shadow Priest and Balance, they have been doing quite well in the testing. As a matter of fact, Shadow Priest was basically the best in the testing, and Balance was in the top 6 of results. Also, in terms of popularity in Mythic Plus, high key levels, 14s, 15s, 16s in Mythic Plus in the PTR. These were amongst the two most played specs in the PTR, although, to be fair, Balance was played more than Shadow Priest, because Discipline Priest was is planned to be the supposedly meta healer, which of course, again, lowers the value of Shadow Priest. Meanwhile, Guardian is not going to be the meta tank, Resto Druid is not going to be the meta healer, which means you have way more possible value for Balanced Druid in Mythic Plus. So Balanced Druid, to be fair, is even like kind of here. Don't even get misled, for example, by the sims of Balanced Druid being quite low, because as mentioned, there is so much padding, so much extra AoE damage you can get for free with Starfall in this raid that their value will still be quite high. So, and yeah, sure, we are talking about padding in a disparaging way, but there are fights where you actually want to get rid of the ads. You actually don't want to get overrun, you don't want to get too crowded with ad spawns, etc, etc, and Balance Druid is very, very good at that playstyle. And also Shadow Priest is, to be fair. So their value based on basically the boss fights in this raid is very high. And they were doing quite well in Mythic class, specifically Balance. That's why Balance is sort of like here, we can take a picture like this. A shadow of Balance is in the S tier right now in terms of results. You know what? Fine. Let's just put Balance in S tier. We can keep it there. We can keep it there with the bonus, the bonus that we believe we're gonna have a caster comp because of Vengeance being meta in Mythic Plus. So we can see Balance Druid being S tier and Shadow Priest right below them. We have left for last Windwalker Monk. Is it because it's a surprise result nobody expected? Not really. Windwalker is in A tier because of their current very high power in single target simulations, which is, as usual, there are about 17 different bugs with the sims of Windwalker. It is likely perhaps going to sit closer to here in the end, but they are doing very well in the single target simulations. And maybe the single target simulations were bugged, but the PTR results were not. And Windwalker was doing quite well there as well. However, Windwalker still suffers from, at the end of the day, being Windwalker, so they are not very popular. They weren't even played that much in Mythic Plus. Their results when they were in Mythic Plus were pretty decent, but if you were to compare their popularity, they would have lost out to Enhancement, to Elemental, to Balance, to BM, to Fire, to Havoc, to Shadow Priest, as well as to Destruction and Frost Decay. So they were basically right below here in terms of popularity in Mythic Plus, and now their current results in the Raid, as well as their simulations of the DPS in single target, are very good. There is a reason to be optimistic about the power level of Windwalker. I wouldn't say I am optimistic about Windwalker making it into the 5 specs for the big meta comp in Mythic Plus. Definitely not. I would trust Enhancement 100% to be there. If Vengeance isn't meta, I would trust Havoc to be there. Even as a surprise pick, I would trust Arms more than Windwalker to be there. But because of their power level in the raid as well, which is very good, I would still think of them to be doing quite well overall in this upcoming season. So this is what we can see at the end of the day. As mentioned, thanks to the alignment chart, some of these results are not there for the same reasons, like for example, as we just mentioned, Windwalker. Purely based on their current power level in the raid, they would be very high, but in Mythic Plus, it's not that exciting right now. Whereas other specs in here, for example, like Havoc, Havoc is supposedly not doing, nearly as well in the raid, but in Mythic Plus their power level would be higher than Windwalker. So there are plenty of things, plenty of blocks to fit in different categories depending on what we get to see being shaped in Mythic Plus. A lot of it will hinge on the choice of the tank and healer. Depending on who gets chosen amongst these picks, you might see some changes in here in terms of comps, of course. So it's not all just who is the strongest DPS. Sometimes it's also up to the composition in Mythic Plus. But for now, based on number 1, the results we have seen in the raid in the PTR, number 2, the simulations for their current expected damage in Season 2, as well as the popularity and the performance of the specs that we have seen in the PTR of Season 2, this is what we would say could be a good enough shape of the meta coming for Season 2. Pending more surprising if they were to come this late, pending some balance tuning, and also pending any possible different compositions in Mythic Plus. But with this out of the way for today, we can now leave each other on this Tuesday, I believe. Yeah. So thanks to everyone for having watched the video, together with, of course, everyone else who is still supporting on Pity for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, I knew I had to stop somewhere. I finished my drink and I had to go on for like 25-30 minutes talking with a dry throat.